Come here, baby. Come on. Come here. Come here. Let's go. Ugh. There we go. Alright. My guest star for the night. Ugh. Beautiful Miss Bonnie. Say hi, Bonnie. Show them your beautiful face. There we go. She's a cutie. She's just hiding right now. Oh, there she is. Not exactly lapdog size, but anyway. Tonight we're going to be taking a look at this Lumberjack Hunter Lightning Bridge Spam deck. This is a really interesting combination. As you can see here, I recently unlocked those new emotes, and they're everywhere. I love them. It's fun to finally have some emotes. I was thinking about spending some money on some of the other ones, but I don't really want to spend any money on this game. I enjoy the fact that it's free. It's free to play, so I think of that as kind of a benefit. But anyway, I thought, let's check out this deck that I found on Royale API. And Bridge Spam's not in the best place right now, and I thought, regardless, I think that there's the potential for it, because if somebody can get 12 wins in a grand challenge with it, then it still must be relatively decent. So I saw this deck, this particular variation of it, and it was really interesting. It was a kind of unusual combination that I'm not used to seeing for Bridge Spam decks, with like the Lightning and the Hunter and the Lumberjack in there. Of course, you got the classic, you got the Ice Golem, you got the Battle Ram, you have the Bandit, you know, and then of course some other cards that you see in Bridge Spam decks sometimes, like the Zap and the Minions. But those other three cards are very unusual for Bridge Spam decks, and it took me some getting used to, that's for sure. I didn't like it at first, but after a while I got used to it. Tried a few classic challenges, and I did pretty well. You know, I ended up getting like 7 or 8 wins in the classic challenge with this deck, which is pretty good for me, actually. I'm not the best player, as you guys know, so, you know, 7 or 8 wins is kind of a pretty good run for me. My average is probably somewhere like 5 or 6. You know, less if I'm using a not-so-great deck or learning a deck, and more if I'm using a deck I'm more comfortable with. So let's talk about this deck specifically. This can be played like an aggressive Bridge Spam deck, but it's more of like a control deck, because it's a little bit more expensive. You'll notice it's 3.5 average elixir cost. Having things like the Hunter, the Lumberjack, and especially the Lightning in there make it a little bit more expensive overall, make the average more expensive, and so it's a little bit pricier of a deck, and you can't necessarily play at the same speed as some other decks. You can't be as quite aggressive with it early on. But your idea is to control and counter push. The idea behind this deck is to do so. So you got the Bandit, you got the Battle Ram, you got the Lumberjack. These are all fast and aggressive cards that are great for counter pushes. So these are cards that are great on defense, and then you can use them to go into a very powerful and deadly counter push. Or if you need to later in the game, you can just keep spamming them at the bridge. Once you've established that elixir lead or an aggressive push and you want to keep supporting it, these cards are all really quick. They get in there fast, they do their job. Lumberjack provides that rage effect. It's just good overall. So this deck is very well complemented by that presence of the Lumberjack, because it's such a fast-paced deck. But let's talk about that a little bit more in the future. So, control and counter push, that's the name of the game with this deck. Even though it is a Bridge Spam deck, you're going to play it kind of like a control deck, and once you've established that lead, that's when you play it more of an aggressive Bridge Spam kind of deck. Now, talking about the Lumberjack, he's got huge synergy potential just with the overall theme of the deck. He's really fast moving, he attacks really fast, he's got really high damage. These are all things that fit with this aggressive theme of kind of the Bridge Spam archetype. He's been a lot more prevalent lately. One thing that I noticed is that Ash rated him second best, legendary in one of his recent videos. And if you don't know who I'm talking about, this is Clash with Ash, or CWA. And if you're watching my videos, you more than likely know who he is. So if you don't, then you must be living under a rock, and you should go definitely check out his channel. And he does these things from time to time where he rates the legendaries or certain cards or for certain rarities or whatever. And Miner is almost always number 1. It has been for a long time. And I agree, it's an awesome, extremely versatile card that plays a specific role that almost no other card in the game can even hope to fill. Now, the Lumberjack, it surprised me because Ash rated him second in this particular last set of balance changes, or this particular last video in this particular set of balance changes, is what I'm trying to say, in this particular patch. So it surprised me because I don't think like he's been buffed or anything recently. other than that health buff that he got, the HP buff that he got with Mini P.E.K.K.A a while back, which is, you know, a long time ago by now. Regardless, he is apparently fitting into a lot of decks. So he works in like balloon cycle decks, beatdown decks, control decks, all kinds of cool stuff. And you can see that he's working out in this bridge spam deck as well. Now, I really like the Lumberjack, don't get me wrong. I love the card. I'm excited that he's fitting into a lot of decks. It just surprised me because I'm not used to him necessarily being one of those cards that can be used in so many different situations. I'm not used to him being top tier. I'm used to him kind of being like one of the not as popular, not as versatile kind of cards. Now the next thing that I want to talk about is actually the Hunter. The Hunter is another card that is, as I mentioned, very unusual. He doesn't traditionally fit into bridge spam decks, just like the Lumberjack doesn't necessarily traditionally fit into bridge spam decks. But he plays a very great, powerful role in this deck. He plays that kind of range support role. You don't have a Musketeer or anything like that, so he's kind of your range support unit. He's also a great tank killer, just like the Lumberjack. So this deck has that kind of potential to destroy beatdown decks, and as you can see, I go up against a few golem decks in these replays, and it ends up working out in my favor. And that could be just those particular matches, but still, just an example of the potential that it does have to destroy tanks and to destroy beatdown decks. So the Hunter, he worked out surprisingly well. I was surprised. I didn't think he'd be great in a bridge spam deck, but I was pleasantly surprised. He's a reliable anti-air. He's a tank killer. He's a swarm killer. He just plays that kind of range support role, which is just good to have in, you know, any deck pretty much. And you don't have any other kind of range support, traditional range support in this card unless you count the minions, which doesn't really count, honestly. He's great to cycle as an opener or play in the back. He's also a great counterpush card. You know, you just use him on defense. He's slow, so he, you know, walks up, gives you the option and the time to build up more of a push while he's slowly walking across the map if you use him on defense or if you cycle him in the back. You know, he's ranged, so he allows you, he plays that role of that range support, you know, and he stays alive while your many melee units are allowing him to stay in the back because they're taking, you know, all the damage up front. And he's just strong overall. He does a lot of damage, so he's a good defensive counter push unit. So it turns out he works out pretty well in this deck. Lightning is not very traditional again in this bridge spam or archetype or the kind of bridge spam classic decks, but it works out pretty well in this. You generally see like a fireball, you know, something cheaper, something that is a little bit quicker. But the lightning, that being said, is actually very fast. It's relatively instant, at least the first strike is. The second and third are a little bit slower, as you guys know. Usually you'll see a fireball though, but in this particular deck you see lightning. It works out surprisingly well. It absolutely obliterates any range support that they might have, that they might use to counter like your ram or your bandit or anything. And I know the bandit naturally counters range support units, so maybe that's not the best example, but if they're, you know, putting down like a musketeer or a wizard or whatever to counter like your ram, you know, then the lightning just obliterates that right away. And it gets that chip damage off on the towers as well, so it can be used to finish off buildings like the Princess Tower, or it can also be used just to consistently, you know, provide a little bit of extra chip damage. You know, let's say that every time you send in your battle ram, they're putting down a musketeer or a wizard, and you lightning it every time. Yeah, that's a negative elixir trade. I wouldn't do it with the musketeer, but maybe I would with the wizard or like a witch. But on top of that, you're getting that chip damage off on the tower each time, and it's a pretty significant amount of damage with the lightning. I don't know if you even counted as chip. As you can see there, it does a really good chunk of damage off onto the tower, so we'll call it chunk damage instead. Alright, so that's the lightning. That's why it works out pretty well in this deck, and I'm very pleasantly surprised with the role that it plays in this bridge spam deck. Now the ram and the golem, this is fun. This is a really fun combination of cards to have in a deck. And these are traditional in bridge spam decks, and the reason that I say that they're a lot of fun to have is because they have huge kiting potential. Like, they have that potential to just, you know, make a P.E.K.K.A walk all the way across the map, and then, you know, use the ram first, and then once it's out of range, you use the ice golem on the opposite lane, and then the P.E.K.K.A chases it all the way across the other side of the map, and it's just a whole lot of fun watching all kinds of units get kited around. And the battle ram and the ice golem, since they're kind of tanky and they only attack buildings, they play the role of being able to kite units quite well. So having both of them in the same deck gives you the potential to use them back and forth, and then be able to cycle back to the first one pretty quickly and use it again if necessary. Now, don't forget that the ram can be used on defense too. Just like a skeleton barrel, it's not always an offensive unit, although you think of it as an offensive win condition, and it usually is. You can use it on defense. Like I said, it can be used to kite, so that's the most direct way to use it on defense. You can also just use it to soak up some damage, then spawn the 2 barbarians, which isn't bad for 4 elixir if you need something on defense, because they'll soak up a few hits with the ram, and then the barbarians will pop out and do some damage. So it works out pretty well, and you can, again, make things chase it, which can be huge defensively. Just like a hog rider, you can use a hog rider on defense by placing it behind the river, making the oncoming knight or Valkyrie or P.E.K.K.A. chase it a little bit, and then they'll hop over the river, and then they'll stop, and then it'll turn around and chase it again once it lands. And so Battle Ram is similar to that. It also pushes the Ice Golem, so it makes it run quicker because it's a much faster unit once it gets charging. So if you put an Ice Golem in front, and the Ice Golem will soak up some damage for that Battle Ram and do that death damage when it dies and the slow when it dies, and it plays that mini tank role for the Battle Ram, and then the Battle Ram will also push it, so it goes really quickly. So that's a very good, again, kind of 2-card combo that works out really well, the Battle Ram and the Ice Golem. Now the minions, they're just kind of like a nice cheap support to have in this deck. They attack air also, just like the Hunter, and they synergize great with the Lumberjack Rage. Rage minions are pretty deadly. Minions do a lot of damage, so if they connect to a tower, or if they're left alone to beat up on a tank or something, they can do some insane damage. Now that, on top of being raged, is just crazy. Anything that's like really swarmy, any swarm unit, synergizes with rage amazingly well. You would think that rage is best with like P.E.K.K.A. or something. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's great with P.E.K.K.A., but it's just unreal with a bunch of swarm units like Skeleton Army or Goblin Gang, or in this case minions. They can do an insane amount of damage, even greater minion horde. If you have ever seen a raged minion horde, it's just absolutely insane. Alright, what do we have next? Well, let's talk about opening moves and card replacements really quickly. For opening moves, I'll probably cycle the Hunter in the back, maybe cycle the Golem in the back. You could also do the Bandit or the Lumberjack. You could also kind of hang tight and wait to see what your opponent plays. That's a strategy, again, that you guys probably know. I don't often do, but it is definitely a viable strategy. Like I said, you could wait to see what they do, and then kind of defend against it, and answer accordingly, and try to wait to see what they do, and use the best potential defense that you have. Hang on to your cards, don't waste anything. But the problem with that is you then potentially leak elixir, and that's what I don't like doing, so that's why I don't like that strategy. But I'm not a professional player, and I've seen a lot of pros use this strategy all the time, so don't take my word for it. It does work out pretty well. You can see here that when the opponent places the Golem in the right lane there, I'm instantly able to punish really heavily, in the left lane there with the Battle Ram and the Bandit. Both 2 very aggressive, fast-moving cards that need to be answered, and all he has to answer is the Night Witch, which is great for me because now he doesn't have the Night Witch to actually support his Golem there, which would be, really deadly for me. A Night Witch behind the Golem is just insane. It does a whole ton of damage when those bats are allowed to be built up. So I don't want that to happen. So this is a huge kind of strategy that you have with Bridge Spam decks, is you can be really aggressive in one lane if you're trying to, either counter push, or if you're trying to put pressure in one lane while your opponent builds up a push in the other lane, because then not only do they have maybe nothing to answer or not a lot to answer it, but if they do invest the elixir into anything to answer it, like that 4 elixir invested into that Night Witch, now he doesn't have that behind his Golem, but he also is 4 elixir short of anything that he could use to support the Golem, which makes it a lot easier for me to shut down that Golem with something real heavy, or something that kills real heavy units, like my Lumberjack like I did earlier, or maybe say like my Hunter or something like that. So that's what I would do for opening moves, and for card replacements, let's talk about those real quickly, and then I think that'll be just about it. We can call it a video. So for Zap, you can always go with Log, as mentioned. For the Ice Golem, there's actually a few replacements that are viable nowadays. The natural replacement for Ice Golem is always going to be Knight, but you can also go Valkyrie. She's not as good as she was in her glory days a few patches ago, but she's still pretty decent. You could also go Royal Ghost. I know that he got that 9% HP nerf, which seems really significant, and it is, but he's still a really powerful card. Was it 9%? I can't remember. But it was a pretty good HP nerf. He's still a really powerful card, and he still has that unique invisibility mechanic, and he also does splash damage, so he's a great card. Works out well in bridge spam decks. For the Battle Ram, unfortunately you can't really replace the Battle Ram. You want something aggressive, maybe like a Prince, something that charges. Same with the Bandit, you want something that charges, you know, like a Prince or a Dark Prince. Dark Prince used to be in a lot of bridge spam decks, but he's not as good anymore. But if you want, you could totally play him, something aggressive like that. For the Lumberjack, maybe like a Mini P.E.K.K.A would be a good replacement, or Mega Minion, something that's heavy hitting, but you want something aggressive, so Mini P.E.K.K.A might be a little bit better. For the Hunter, maybe another range support like the Musketeer, or another heavy hitter again like the Mini P.E.K.K.A. For minions, pretty much just any support card, any cheap, you know, Spear Goblins, Goblins would work out pretty well, but if you want, you could also use a Mega Minion. That's a good card replacement for just about anything. And of course for Lightning, you could go Rocket or just go for Fireball, because that's a great card to have in these bridge spam decks. Alright guys, that is it for tonight's video. Make sure to like the video if you enjoyed it, give it a thumbs up, and to leave a comment in the comment section below if you have any questions, or if you have anything that you would like to say, or any suggestions, or just want to drop off and say, hey, what's up, Mr. Berger? Alright guys, thanks so much for watching. Make sure you subscribe if you haven't done so, and have a good night.
It was made by Louis Vuitton.